Hi guys, David with Some Game Company here. Last week we posted our first video showing off our game Ghoulians that we're developing. This week I'm just going to take some time and kind of show you the workings of our editor as well as breaking down that level that was in that video. So first I want to kind of give you a demonstration of our editor. Right now you can see our view port here. This kind of gives us the 3D view to our game when we're making our levels. And of course up here, just like any other good editor, you're going to have your camera views, your resolution, grids if you want to snap objects to the grid, and some of your controls to move around in the environment. We also have them set to shortcut keys so you don't actually have to rely on that. So if you, right now I'm on a front view and you kind of see nothing's in perspective, it's all flat and it looks very 2D-ish, and the game really is very 2D-ish. It's no 3D elements in this game. It's pretty much all composed of sprites. So if we switch to a camera that's in perspective, I'll kind of give you an idea of what I mean when I say the game is not 3D. Let's see here, let's switch to object 1. So now you kind of see how everything is in the game is flat. There's no 3D models or anything like that. It's all flat and they're all set to overlap each other to kind of give that 3D effect. And you can kind of see that on the trees here, how they're made of a few different objects, all layered and all in different heights. And it looks 2D from this perspective, but when you're kind of in perspective up here and kind of hovering over like the way the game camera works in our game when you're playing it, it does give the illusion of 3D. Same thing for the fences. I mean, if you're looking at them like this, they look kind of 3D, but if you get a little bit closer and move the camera down, you can see it's obviously not 3D. But it gives the effect, and we're kind of pleased with the outcome. So to kind of give you a demonstration of how I start putting these levels together, first of course I start jotting down the idea that I have on paper, and it kind of goes from there. But the very basic start to any level is outlining the boundaries of that level. Now, our game, we use tiles, these boundary tiles that I've created here, and we start laying those out. And I lay those out kind of in accordance to what I have on my concept on paper, and then we start placing all the objects in the world. Now, if you look over here, let me switch back to front view real fast. If you look over here, you can kind of see these tiles laid out. Now, these tiles, just like every other object in the game, are layered to kind of give that 3D effect. You have the basic ground tile, which is the dirt and the rocks. You have a, I don't think these have a mid tile, but a top tile, which is the grass that overlaps. And in perspective view, you can kind of see it kind of moving, kind of parallaxing almost across each other to kind of give that 3D effect. So what I do, we have a grid here, and I'll set the grid setting up here, and of course turn it on. And then when you drag these around, let me set it to something higher so you can kind of see it snapping. Of course, just like any 2D editor, you have snapping, and you know it all snaps together really nicely and seamlessly, and then gives you the effect that it's all connected without, you know, any breaks anywhere. So that's pretty much what I do. I start laying out the boundary of the game, and then we go from there. Now, these objects, of course, have to be collidable, and you know, right now you don't see a collision or anything like that, a collision box or any kind of collisions around it. So we do have a polygon object, and that polygon object kind of lets us create these collision objects that are kind of invisible, and that's what I have. I have it, let me select that again. I have it set on all of these objects, and I just draw the polygon around the object artwork, and it gives the illusion of when you hit it, you stop. And that's pretty much how we control the collisions for those bordering objects. Now, to give you, I guess, a demonstration of how we start filling the level with objects, we create these objects, you know, one-offs, and save them in their own files, and we save them as library objects. That way we can just pull them from the library and drop them in our editor, and from there we can duplicate them, move them around, place them however we see fit, and it makes it very simple. Now, creating these objects get a little complicated depending on what you're wanting to make, of course, just like any other game. If you look down here, let me introduce you to our script graph. This is kind of the workings of the game, the workings of the level. Everything that has triggers, everything that is in the level is going to show up in our script graph down here. Now, every object has inputs and outputs, and those inputs and outputs can be tied together with logic nodes, material switching nodes, a lot of different types of nodes, particles, and if you look up here under our menus, we have a lot of various things in here. Under scripts, this is kind of all the nodes that you can drop down in the script graph, as well as objects. Now the objects, you can see we have our own Booleans drop down here, and this is more game specific to our game, and it contains a lot of the stuff that we use in our game. Under the scripts, you'll have various drop downs and menus here. You have logic, materials, vector math, cameras, animation. You get the point. So you select whatever node you want, and it'll pop up down here in our script graph. And from there, you can start connecting the plugs for these nodes to accomplish different things. Now, to give you kind of an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about hooking these up and making them work in our game, let's see. Over here, you kind of see 3 boxes just sitting over here on the left, not really doing much of anything. Now, in the demonstration video that I showed before, the 3 boxes were down here in this little area. Now, what I've done is I've tried to randomize the key that lets you get into the red door up here. Now, the key is going to be in one of 3 boxes that spawn down in this area. Now, the way I accomplish this is I randomize it. I kind of created a randomizing object, and let me kind of show you this object real fast. Let's see, properties. Right now the randomizing object is invisible, so you can't really see it, so I'm gonna add some textures to it. That way we can see it in action. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. Alright, now let's go back up here to the viewport. Now, the player, when he starts the level, of course, he's going to always start by his UFO. Alright, so the randomizing objects are up here. You're going to have to hit them before you get out of the starting area. There's just no getting around it. And what this essentially is doing is one of these 3 objects are going to trigger some events. So these boxes that are sitting out here to the left, when one of these objects are triggered, it's going to move all 3 of these boxes into one of 3 positions down here. So, as well as these 3 objects up here that are outputting when a player touches them, they're all spinning, so it's going to be completely random because you have a little bit of room that you have to run before you hit one of these objects. So you're never going to be completely consistent with the time that you cross this amount of area. You're always going to be a little random. So when you hit it, you're likely to hit any 3 of them, and you really can't predict which 3 you're going to hit, which one of the 3 you're going to hit. Let me kind of show that in the engine real fast or in the game. So here we go, we're starting by the UFO, and now you can see the randomizer object is spinning away, spinning away. Now as soon as I hit that, it goes away, it kills it. I don't want to get hit by the cannon there. So now when we go down here, the trap door triggers, there's a little object in here. As soon as the player touches it, triggers the trap door to go up, and you can't get out. So now you can see that once we hit that randomizing object up there, it moves these boxes down here. Now you're going to have to break one of these boxes open to find a key. And of course, some of the boxes are going to contain enemies. Now what the randomizing object also does is it enables one of 3 keys, collidability, and it switches the material so that it's visible. So there's actually 3 other keys in this area. One here, and one here where the other crate was. Pick up the key, trap door is no longer closed on us, and of course we can go up here and open this door. So that's how that works. the reason why I did that the way that I did, instead of just having some kind of hard-coded randomizing thing, let me fix that, is because I just wanted to see if it could be done. If it could be done with a script, why not do it with a script? And it works out really well, so I think we're going to keep it. So that is kind of an in-depth detail of how that particular sequence of events happens. If you want to break it down by the script and kind of get an idea of how it happens, so I'll show you that. Here's one of the objects. As you can see, it's a script object zone. So you have all these outputs that can take place when the player, or the one that we're going to use is when the player touches the zone. So we're going to output is touching player, and we're going to do some logic here. Logic, we got some flip-flops that are going to set some parameters, and it's going to be setting up these vector switchers, and these vector switchers are ultimately what move the boxes. It's going to move the positions of the boxes and the keys. Alright, so you can see over here I have all of the keys outlined. You got key 1, key 2, key 3, so on and so forth. And all of these are always down here in these locations. Now we're just kind of throwing the boxes over the top of them and preventing you from picking any of the keys up. Also, to prevent you from picking the keys up, their default, they're set to not being collidable. So as soon as you hit one of these objects, any of the three, it's going to trigger those events, and it's going to enable one of these three keys to be collidable, and it's going to move all of these boxes into the positions down here where the keys are. And it's going to do the same thing for the ladybug enemy objects that you've seen in the game. They're up here. It's feeding those as well. It's going to enable them by making them collidable, and it's gonna wake them up from being asleep, and it's going to change their material so that they're visible. So that's how that happens. What else? Let's see. Some of the other objects that you see in this game so far, you can see our enemies. We have a fly up here that smacks you with a fly swatter. We have a bee down here that will shoot a stinger at you. And those are all objects that are, as well, just like the key and the lock, are scripted. For instance, this is the B script, I believe. Let me scroll in here. Here we go, B script. So the B script is pretty complex. You can see a lot of logic nodes in here. You can see a lot of timers, a lot of vector switchers, so on and so forth. And some of the workings of the B, to give you an idea of how I've put this together. He has an object that sits in front of him, and kind of similar to the objects up in the randomizer, if the player touches the object that's sitting in front of the bee will trigger the event that shoots the stinger. Now the event not only shoots the stinger, but it does some other things. For instance, it will change the bee's texture to make it look like his backside is tucked up under him and the stinger's going out in front of him. And it does some other things too, such as putting the bee to sleep for X amount of time so that the player has time to get away, so on and so forth. And there's a couple more components to the enemies that make them a little bit more complex than just shooting and chasing you down. For instance, we have a lot of different separate segments of the bee. The head's separate, the wings are separate, the body is separate. So the head is actually a turret object, and the turret object, of course, always chases the player, so it's always going to change its orientation to face the player. Now what I've done is I've set an object that is around the front and the back of the bee. So if the object is touching the front, if the player is touching the front object and not touching the back object, the orientation of the turret is going to be looking at the player. So that kind of gives the effect that the bee, if you're in perspective of the bee, he is going to see you and he is going to look at you. He's going to turn his head. I can kind of give me a demonstration of that. Let me move the player here, and we'll put that over by, let's do the fly. I like the fly a little bit more. Well, here we go. And we'll just move him over here by the fly, and we'll save it and go ahead and launch the game. You can see the fly is just zipping around here, And they all have a turning radius and some stuff that we're going to have to iron out as the game gets further along. But you can see that if I get in the object that is directly in front of the fly or around the fly, he'll start turning his head looking at me. Now, the fly is a little bit more complex than the bee, the fact that he has a fly swatter at you. Scripting that was a little tricky, but I think the overall result is pretty good. Kind of gives you an idea of how to get used to it. Alright, I think that's about it for now. Next week I'll try to show you some of the newer assets that we've added to the game. Until then, thanks. Bye.